Summoners, my name is Tia and welcome back to another ProGuides video. Today we're going to be looking at 4 level 1 strategies you should be using to win your games. Before we hop into the video though, don't forget to join us on Discord so you can have exclusive access to giveaways, classes, and overall be a part of a great community. We're all friends. The link can be found in the description down below. Now let's get into the video. Starting us off with our list, we've got one of the most famous level 1 strategies. That's right, Summoners, we're talking about the INVADE. I'm sure you've all had the experience. You're just sitting there waiting to leash your jungler, thinking about a game plan when suddenly, a wild blitz hook appears and forces your flash. This style of play is a bit risky, but if you play it smart and only invade when you have the advantage, you can get a very strong lead early. Let's go over a few different types of invades and when you should do them. The standard invade is the pretty normal invade that everyone does. There are a few different paths you can take. If you're invading bot side, you can either invade through mid lane and sneak into the bush, or bot lane. If you want to invade top side, you can go through river or through top lane. After you get into position, you're going to want to then slowly creep into the enemy jungle for vision and/or kills. Placing wards near the enemy raptors or buffs are very important if you invade, as it will allow you to see where the enemy jungler is starting. With this info, you can get a rough estimate of when they'll gank you. This type of invade is best used if you have a champion with long-range CC. That means as long as you have someone like Anivia, Morgana, or Swain, you can pull off a decent invade. That being said, don't assume just because you have CC that you should always go in for an invade. Invades in general are best used when your team has a stronger level 1, which means your abilities are better. You should also consider the reason you're invading. Going into the enemy jungle risks you dying and giving the enemy a lead, and in some situations you can lose lane because of it. If you scale better than your counterpart and know you can win lane, sometimes that chance of an extra kill isn't worth it, as it can turn your favorable matchup into a losing one. Late invading is exactly what the name suggests. You and your team, besides your top laner, should sit in the mid or river bush until the enemy buff spawns. You tend to want to move into their jungle at around 1 minute 25 seconds. Once you move in, sneak around the side and kill the enemy jungler. If done correctly, the enemy jungler will lose their buff and your team should score a kill. Again, this is risky. If the enemy team is stronger and rotates, they can end up getting 4 kills even if their jungler falls behind. Regardless, if you're able to convince your team to pull this off with you, it's a fairly safe strategy compared to a standard invade. This last style of invading is actually just learning how to play against it. If the enemy has champions that tend to invade as well as powerful level 1 champions, it's best to have your team stack in a bush in your jungle. If you all sit in a bush, once the enemy gets close enough to face check, you can collapse on them. Stacking is best used if your team has AoE damage or CC such as Cyan Q, Sivir Q, Jinx rockets, etc. If your team doesn't want to stack and/or you know you'll lose if you stack, simply ward the pixel brush and run away as soon as possible. This will prevent your team from dying to a standard invade as well as letting you see a late invade. Next up, we've got a pretty simple tactic that surprisingly a lot of players don't use. It doesn't require any special mechanics, champions, or even a lot of time. This is the strategy of creating and knowing your game plan. Believe it or not, many players go into their games and immediately autopilot. They run to the jungle or to lane and simply sit and wait for minions to spawn. This downtime, as well as the loading screen time, can be used for way better things. Use this free time you have to make sure you understand how to come out victorious before the game even starts. To build your game plan, ask yourself a few questions about the game state, matchups, and goals. For example, you can ask yourself, do I win or lose this matchup and why? Should we look to fight early? Do we win team fights? Are they going to invade us? Etc. These types of questions force you to focus on the game and allow you to create a set plan to follow that helps you understand your win conditions. If you're a scaling team, you're not going to want to play super aggressive and you'll know you can afford to lose a bit early. Be sure to know your game plan prior to minions spawning, but don't be afraid to reassure and reconsider it later on. The more you think about your match, the better it can go. Before we continue on, let's quickly cover our question of the day. What is one of the craziest level 1 experiences you've ever had? Mine was actually recently. I casted this game wherein I really got a 4-man stun, killed 4 of them, and still managed to lose. But enough about me, I want to know yours. Leave it in the comments down below. Moving on, we have one of the strongest level 1 tactics used by pro players like Faker. It's simply pressuring the enemy. Alright, it may not be as simple as it sounds, but once you learn how to properly pressure your enemy, you can gain a massive lead level 1 that can snowball into an even bigger lead later on. There are multiple ways to pressure the enemy, and each one works best in different situations. We have multiple videos surrounding this topic, but let's quickly dive in depth on a few vital ones. The concept of trading is fairly basic. You do damage to the enemy, and they do damage to you. However, the most effective form of trading is done when your enemy goes for CS. The minute you see them begin their auto animation for a minion, you can attack them for free damage. This is even stronger if you have a ranged advantage against the enemy, as you can get multiple attacks off before they have a chance to retaliate. Also, since you know their goal is to farm, you can position yourself around a minion with low HP. Then they have to make a choice. They either miss the minion or take damage. Regardless, you come out on top. If you have a significant advantage due to range, damage, or overall counter matchups, don't be afraid to push this tactic further, which leads us to our next concept. Zoning is the ability to stop an enemy from moving towards a specific area. This is usually seen by control mages and their ability to put down CC or AoE damage abilities that force the enemy to either go around it or tank the damage. With this in mind, you can do this starting level 1 if the matchup is in your favor. For example, if you're playing Quintop versus someone like Renekton, you know you have a range and damage advantage. This means instead of just trading and harassing when he tries to CS, you can constantly do damage to him if he even dares to step up. That means you can stop him from farming early on altogether. Just be careful you don't take too much minion aggro and damage, or you can end up losing the trade through the minions alone. If you play bot lane with a friend, you can often do this tactic together for a much stronger effect. If you know your 2v2 is better than theirs, don't be afraid to threaten them by standing behind their casters. This is best used if the enemy has a weak level 1 and is susceptible to CC. For example, if you have a Nautilus support and the enemy ADC is Aphelios, you can threaten him due to how weak he is early on and how high Nautilus's base damage is. Zoning is a bit difficult to do and takes a lot of practice, but it's an extremely powerful tool that allows you to slowly build up an advantage and force your enemy out of lane. Our final concept for pressuring the enemy is using your level up pressure. I'm sure you all know that you can look to engage on the enemy when you know you'll level up and they won't. However, many players end up rushing this process and hit level 2 near the enemy's turret. This means you can't use the advantage correctly and it effectively goes to waste. A better way to do this is to slowly let the minion die. Instead of rushing to level 2, get close enough that one minion will level you up and then start zoning the enemy. The enemy is now forced to sit back because they know at any point you can kill the minion and level up. This allows you to get some free harass as well as a lot of lane pressure early on. If you play bot lane, this tactic can be especially powerful as most supports have a strong level 2 power spike. Similar to zoning, this is best used when you have a duo partner, but regardless, you can still pull it off. Since you have 2 people in your lane, both you and your support can pressure the enemy with level 2. Since you technically gain 2 levels off of this, that means you can often get a kill if the enemy disrespects how strong you are. Our last level 1 strategy may catch a lot of you by surprise. This tactic is extremely powerful and it's one that many players struggle with. It may not make sense at first, but don't worry summoners, we're going to quickly break it down as best as we can. We are going to be covering the art of learning not to lose. Many of the strategies we've covered can create a slow, snowballing lead in the early game, which is great for you and your team. But you need to keep in mind it's not as great if the enemy does it to you. The strategy of learning to lose is based around understanding what you should do to make sure even if you don't win early on, you still have a chance of winning later. To master this skill, it takes a massive amount of discipline, especially if you personally feel like you're always the carry. Sometimes it's best to simply sit back and let your enemy use these tactics on you, but not to their full effect, so that you can win later on in the game. Sure, the enemy can invade, but instead of kills and summoners, they'd only get vision. Occasionally, the enemy will zone you off minions and pressure you, but instead of a health and/or kill advantage, they now have a slight XP and gold advantage. Knowing your enemy has the game plan of scaling in mind, you can begin to break apart what makes their plan strong and work against it. For example, let's say you're playing a late game scaling champ like Vayne into someone like Caitlyn. Without even looking at the support matchups, you should expect to be down in gold and experience by the end of the laning phase. Your goal here is to minimize your losses and take what you can get. If the enemy Caitlyn is just as good as you are, she'll make it difficult to farm without getting poked down. Going by our learn to lose strategy, figure out what you need to do before you get to lane. Should you buy a Doran's shield instead of a Doran's blade? Is your support a sustained support or an all-in support? Can you just run at your opponent and outplay them? Once you figure out your plan, test it out and see what works. There's potential to counter and mitigate losses for all of these strategies, but the important part is you must learn that you don't always have to win. Sometimes it's best to sit back on your level 1 and laugh as you understand that you'll be winning at level 6 regardless. If you enjoy content like this, be sure to visit us at ProGuides.com so you can become of the family. If you've never tried the ProGuides subscription, don't forget that from now until the 20th, you can use the discount code RANKUP2021 for 20% off your next subscription. That's a steal. Just head over to the website and enter the code for your sweet discount. If you've always wanted to test it out, now's your chance. No Kangas, leveling Portal on Bard and trying to invade its 5 in the enemy jungle doesn't count as a level 1 strat. You're just trolling, please just take your cue. Well, that's it for level 1 strategies. We hope you enjoyed the video and hopefully found a new strategy to use in your solo queue games. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Join our Discord community through the link in the description below and yell at Kangas. I can't wait to see you in the next video, but until then, have fun, stay safe, and have a great day. Ah! No! No!